What's up everybody? Welcome back to a new video. In this video, I want to show you a lesson from mtbcourse.com. It's a full online course that I was filming with my buddy Scott Bell over the last year. And if you use the code MarkyMath50, it'll give you 50 bucks off the entire course. All right, let's jump into this lesson. It's all about how to ride with more style. The final progression of advanced jumping is technical airs. For example, transfers, really boosting and getting sideways, changing direction in the air, unique movements and lines that you can take that other riders don't see. A lot of this is just getting more creative at the jumps or on the trail. The possibilities are really endless when it comes to technical airs, but I have three favorites that I love to do all the time. Number one is tabletops, number two is moto whips, and number three is transferring between different sets of jumps. I'm gonna teach you how to do all three of these things and break down all the skills you need to think about in the air, approaching the jump and on the landing. Tabletops are a very simple motion, but there's a lot of movement going on at the same time. Once you get it down in your mind, it'll be like nothing. But when you're learning, there's so much to think about and it's really easy to get confused. So before you even start hitting jumps and trying to get your bike flat in the air, I want you to take your bike, put it up on its back wheel like this, and practice the motion just with your arms. Grab your rear brake so your tire doesn't slide around on the bottom, and start practicing the motion you need to do with your arms when you're in the air. So what happens is you're basically pushing one hand underneath the opposite arm like this. And this motion of swinging is what's making the front end of the bike start to get flat. What I do to really help me click it is I'll take my outside wrist, I'll roll it underneath, and then I'll push it under the opposite armpit. So it's basically getting tossed and underneath my other arm like this. And that's what's happening there. And then a big part of it is how your lower body's working and how your hips are moving and your knees. While this is happening, you want your knees to be turning the way that you're going. So for example, if my tires are going to the left and my bike's going flat to the right, I want to turn my hips this way, almost the opposite direction the bike's going, and I want to try getting my knees over top of my top tube. That's really the goal there. So your whole body's twisting away from where the wheels are being tossed towards, and you're going this whole direction the whole time. And that's basically what's happening. So you could even like get that basic motion into your mind by putting one leg in the air and kind of imagining you're doing this in the air with both legs. And you're almost looking backwards, you're twisting so much with your hips. It's like a big twisting, pulling motion, and then you're really snapping that tabletop. When you're twisting your hips and putting your knees over that top tube, naturally your feet are gonna wanna slip off, especially the foot that's on the top here. Because when I'm turning my hips and turning my knees up and over the top tube, I'm going from my feet flat on the pedals to basically just my toes on the pedals, or sometimes it'll even completely float off a little bit. Even the inside foot, if you're really cranking and you're trying to like move your hips and your knee over, this inside foot here might even just be like floating like that, and then you'll just have your toe on like that. But that's something you don't really need to think about, because this will naturally happen when you start twisting those hips and turning those knees over. And it's one snapping motion. So as you do this with your arms, the same thing's happening with your hips all at once. It's all one big flowing motion. It's a lot of stuff to think about at once, but if you individually work on all these little skills and eventually blend them together, then you'll really start to figure it out and it'll make a lot of sense. And everyone also has their own unique style of doing tabletops. So never try to copy anyone else and make yours look exactly like theirs. Just think about all those basic movements, and when you're in the air, try to break that down in your mind and figure out what works best for you in terms of timing and the order of all those moving body parts. Another favorite of mine is moto whips. A moto whip is when you go off the jump, pop as high as you can, and then as you're popping and going up, you're kicking out that back tire and trying to get past 90 degrees. The more sideways you get, the cooler it looks. When I'm approaching the takeoff, I have in mind, I want to boost off the jump as high as I can. The more pop and the more boost that I get means the more energy I have to really blast off and kick that back tire out in the air. To get my back tire as sideways as possible and get the bike completely past 90, it's always a challenge, but I figure when I go really high, it's always gonna look better, even if I don't quite get it all the way out there. What I do to really make this happen is I come off the jump carving a little bit, because that sets me up in the position to start going sideways. So I'm not going to go off the jump sideways. I'm going to lead the inside of my body one direction depending on which way I whip. For example, I like to put my back tire to the left, so I'm going to lean the right side of my body and carve to the right slightly. As I'm carving off, I'm really pushing down on the lip with the pedals and preparing to like use those legs and those hips to kick that back tire out and really whip out with the hips. So the kicking motion kind of happens with the feet and the pedals, and then the whipping and getting sideways motion happens with the hips in conjunction with the carving. So as I'm carving, and once I start getting into the air and both tires are in the air, then I'm really whipping out with my hips. I'm still looking straight, but I'm allowing the hips to turn at least 90 degrees and then really direct the bike and lead it and force it to go out to the side. I want my arms to go away from my feet, kind of so the whole body is extending and pushing one side of your body is pushing away from the other. And then you're really like throwing the bike out there to one side. Now, once you start playing around with this, it'll be very easy to get your bike completely sideways in the air. The really tough part is coming back in straight. And that's another reason why I like to pop, because that natural up and down motion will help bring you back straight in. A little different from like a scrub whip where you stay really low and you're carving hard. It's really easy to get caught up low and sideways, but the more you pop, the more time you have falling into the landing and the more time you have to straighten out. Another thing I find is when I'm popping like this and using my hips, I can just like snap my hips back the direction I came from and then have my arms follow, and this nice quick motion will bring me back in straight right away. And the most technical one out of all these airs is transfers. Because with a transfer, you're not actually going up and down in the air, you're going from one side to the other. There's a lot going on there. You have to really focus on the takeoff and the landing, but then the actual air isn't just like holding on and setting up. You're fully pulling off to one side and you're transferring and traveling sideways in the air. It's weird because it's never a natural feeling no matter how good you are at it, and the way you hit the takeoff and come off the takeoff will completely change the feeling of the whole thing and dictate how the whole thing happens. Here's what I do on the takeoff. I start off by figuring out and drawing a line in my mind what the line will be from where I'm going off to where I'm landing. The line you take from the start is basically the line you'll get stuck doing. The more straight on you hit the jump, the less you're going to travel sideways. You can get away with going at it more straight on if you pull up harder and pop harder, because then you're using a pulling motion to get from one side to the other versus traveling diagonally. So for me, if I want to go really high on this transfer behind me and I still want to travel sideways, I'm going to come off it a little straighter. I'm going to pull really hard and use my body and like just my own force to try to pull me over in the air, which is really hard because you can only do so much and gravity will do the rest. So there's always an angle you have to come off the jump at. When you're first learning how to do these transfers, I really recommend you can find a setup like this one behind me where it's the first set of jumps in a line and you don't have to worry about your setup so much. You can come at the jump straight on and then pick your line from there and pick the diagonal route you want to take. This will help you visualize what to do when you're approaching a takeoff to transfer. If I'm going to go on this jump from left to right to that landing way over there, I want to approach this takeoff on the outside, so coming on the far left, and I want to ride off it a little sideways, kind of like this. Basically going from one corner to the other. Now, this is the most extreme kind of example of coming off a jump crooked. You want to come off it more straight on for the most part, but that kind of gives you a good sense of it. And when it's your first time trying transfers, this is a really good technique for just getting a feel for it. Because when you come off it from one side to another like that, and you're going off it completely diagonal, that means you're pretty much still riding a straight jump because you're coming off it. You're gonna be at a straight on motion in the air. You're not gonna be like pulling sideways in the air. And you're gonna come into that next landing sideways. But for most riders who are first learning how to do this, it's a lot easier to whip your bike 45 degrees into that landing to go straight than actually move and travel sideways in the air. The more comfortable you get with this motion and the more this makes sense, the more straight on you can hit the ramp, and that can be your level of progression of transfers. Going from crooked to straighter and straighter and straighter. Eventually you'll get to the point where you can almost go off straight, you can blast a jump really high, and then you'll let yourself pop and travel like this in the air, like a really cool sideways motion. and it'll start to make sense. It'll always feel weird, but it'll make a lot more sense the better you get at it. What I love about getting to this level and really practicing these technical airs is there's so much room for creativity. You can really do whatever you want, whether it's doing it in whatever style you want, picking the trick that you want to work on the most. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. Everyone rides things in a very unique and different way. And these are basically just pointers for you to get out there and start trying and figuring out what works best for you.